Hello and welcome to Artists in Conversation, brought to you by the Brandywine Workshop and Archives. I'm your host, Patty Smith. For those of you who may not be familiar with Brandywine Workshop and Archives, here's a little background. BWA has been a vital, diversity-driven, nonprofit cultural institution for 50 years. It's located in Philadelphia. Its mission is to produce and share art in order to inspire and build bridges among global communities. BWA has several ongoing programs. It funds short-term residencies for artists to produce limited edition artist prints. It works to bring the art of diverse cultures to institutions and communities through exhibitions and by establishing satellite collections across the country. BWA offers internships to Philadelphia high school and undergraduate college students who are majoring in art or a related field. And its latest project, called Artura, is a free, interactive digital archive of culturally diverse art that gives educators and students access to information and images representing contemporary cultures and traditions from around the globe. You can access this unique website by registering at artura.org, and you can find more information about Brandywine at their website, Brandywine Workshop and archives.org. As part of the residency program at Brandywine, we have in the past invited artists to participate in Artists and Conversation. Formerly, it was an in-person event, and now conversations are being brought to you virtually. Today's guest is Floyd Newman, artist and professor of visual arts at the University of Houston downtown. Professor Newsum's career spans some 44 years as a visual artist. He received a Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree from the Memphis Academy of Arts and the Master of Fine Arts from Tyler School of Art, Temple University, here in Philadelphia. He has been in more than 100 solo and group exhibitions in several prestigious institutions, including the Taft Museum in Cincinnati, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Contemporary Arts Museum in Houston, and many others across the United States. He has also exhibited at the Galleria Kalifia in Horasjovice in the Czech Republic, and the University of Hong Kong Museum and Art Gallery, and the American Center in St. Petersburg, Russia. His works are in the permanent collections of museums like the Studio Museum of Harlem, Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, Washington, D.C., the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art, to name just a few. Professor Newsum has been selected to produce 6 public art commissions. He believes that an artist should work in many different mediums, and he has created prints, drawings, and sculptures. Hello, Professor Newsum. Welcome. And let me begin with this question. As a visiting artist at Brandywine, you have produced several prints. Would you please talk about those prints and how you came to work at the Brandywine Workshop?
First of all, I want to say that it is a pleasure to be here with you, Patty, and to be a part of this series. I am a great supporter and admirer of all the work that Alan Edmonds has done with Brandywine Print Shop.
Thank you.
My involvement with Brandywine started, I think it was around 95 maybe. And John Biggers had just made a print. And he came back and he said to me, Floyd, why haven't you made a print up in Brandywine? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, try. You should apply. He said, you know the guy who's over it. I said, yeah, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna get in it. so I submitted my application, and I was awarded an opportunity to be, I think, for 2 weeks. And it was the first print that I had done since college. And so it was a great experience, especially because it was a new, different kind of medium. We were not working on a plate or a stone. We were working on mylar. And Alan was great assisting me and giving me ideas on how to approach my concept. So the piece that's on the screen now is called, actually it's three women, Blue Spirit Soar, Blue Spirit Soar. And my works for many years have been involved with the woman as a central component. Because I've been married for 49 years to a beautiful person, Janice, and I had a great mom, Evelyn, and so my dad taught me always to respect women, and so I've always had that desire to use either the woman itself or something symbolic, something that would be a catalyst for me making my work. The experience at Brandywine was indeed a pleasure because I had not been in Philadelphia for many years. To have that couple of weeks of just concentration on creating work without any disturbance, that was a great opportunity for me, and a pleasure, indeed a pleasure.
What are some of the important influences on your creativity and imagery?
Well, there's several. I spoke about the woman, but ladder, which my father was a firefighter, and he was one of the first African American firefighters in the South. In Memphis, Tennessee, there were 12. And so I used the ladder to honor him and firefighters, not just African American firefighters, but the firefighters, period. But my dad was a great supporter, and he was the last survivor of the 12 that started integrating the fire department back in 1955. The fish, the dog, and just whimsical marks are a part of those things that I use to create my work. The fish is like the bird of the sea. The dog in Egyptian mythology protects the woman. The marks come from me observing a variety of drawings on walls of houses and walls that surrounded a village in Seru. Seru is a small village in Ghana, and the women were responsible for decorating those walls. They would use their fingers to draw, and of course, when the rainy season would appear, the work would be washed away. So they always had a job because they always had to come back and redo their work. So that was a heavy influence. So I use women or things that are somewhat symbolic toward women, but it was the woman of Africa who of this small village in Ghana that really got me to making these marks and brought me from realism to abstraction.
Do you have some of the drawings that you've been making for as preliminaries?
Uh, this is very this. There's some marks. I think you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Another piece here.
Mm-hmm.
It's ink and gouache. This piece is just all gouache. So they influenced me by becoming freer with my marks. If you go to my website, you look at the section that says watercolor gouache, you'll see back in 1972 that I did these watercolors that look trompe l'oeil, French word that means so real it fools the eye. As I take the camera, I'm going to rotate this camera to show you a few things in the studio.
Mm-hmm. Great.
You're going to see this abstraction.
Are those all gouache also?
No, no, these are acrylics, oil, all kinds of objects like a can,
Uh,
crayon. You can see that woman there. There's a portrait of a woman, and that's painted very realistic. So I still have that skill to create realism. But if you look at this section right here in the middle, there's a woman.
oh yeah, I see. Hmm.
Here are her eyes, her nose, her mouth, her breast, stomach, her hands. This is very abstract. But this particular piece
Hmm.
is more realistic. So I just enjoy, making works that have a lot of color, a lot of freedom of creating form, but also embedded in some of these works are transparencies. Like in that piece there, there's some transparencies there. And here on the floor, right there, is a piece that I think we have a close-up of it. I think
Oh,
Tom,
yeah, I think we might have a slide of that we can put
yeah,
up.
I believe you do.
There it is.
It's called I View the Cross. And it has a combination of gouache and a little bit of oil, transparency, some photographs, crayon, all kinds of things that are collaged on that image. I do a lot of work in the community. Uh, uh, I have a nickname. I'm called an ass because I'm an artist social servant. And I can't separate my art from being a social servant. And so I was doing a ministry called foot washing that my church was involved with, Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church here in Houston. And there was this one person named Billy. And Billy, although he was homeless, he could dress so fantastic. And in that composition, in the middle of it, there's this guy with a red hat and a red coat, and that's Billy. And he inspired me to do that work. But embedded in that work are little things about Jim Crow, which has come back. We call it Jim Esquire now, maybe. But so there's Billy.
Mm-hmm.
Look down in the middle, that's Billy. And then there's all kinds of things. The house, symbols. I believe in family. I have a beautiful son and daughter who I'm quite proud of. My son lives in Hong Kong and works for himself with artificial intelligence and robotics. And my daughter is in Brooklyn, New York. She's a producer and art coordinator. And of course, I got my great wife, who's a professor at University of Houston, Clear Lake in library science. But so all of my experiences are somewhat embedded in my work. I kind of sometimes tell stories, and it may be several stories in one work, and it allows because of the complexity and because it's so free. It allows the viewer, you to come up with your own story about my work. I don't like just being so direct that there's only one message, but I like messages being invented or realized with the experience that you would have when you have an encounter with my work.
I think we have a couple more slides of your work.
This is called the OG at Playtime. It's actually behind me, but it's several layers of paintings that are behind me. But it's a rather large piece of 55 by 80, and that's acrylic and oil on paper. And you would say oil on paper. Well, because of my academic training, I have to put a primer. I have to put a sealer on the paper so that the oil that's on the paper does not touch the paper, so the paper would not rot or become brittle. But my dog's named DOG, and she's a character, and so she's the central component, or part. But my great grandmother Janie is also in this particular piece, and she was uneducated, but she was a manager of money. She was a manager of money, and I honored her with several paintings. And because I honored her, when the deputy director of the Smithsonian African American Museum of History and Culture visited my studio, I told her about this particular painting, and she was very excited about it. So she said she was going to come back and visit me again, and she was going to bring the chief curator because she could not make a decision. The chief curator had to come and see the work, and so she saw the work. I told them about the story, and they bought that piece for the museum. But the piece that's on display was donated by my great friend Alan Van Fleet, and he gifted it to the museum as a gift from the Van Fleets from Texas, and it's on display now. In fact, it's the third painting. When you go on the fourth floor and you enter into the Fine Arts Gallery, it's the third painting that you would see. This piece is Sierra Janie's Journey. It's also behind me. It's really large, and it's all those marks that I made into my own kind of mark, but they are the stimuli from those women who were creating those beautiful marks on the walls of Sierra. And so my marks don't look exactly like theirs, and it shouldn't, but it has that free motion and movement. It's like drawing and painting at the same time. And I just thoroughly enjoy doing that. I love color, always have. And in this particular piece, there are several photographs or transparencies. I try not to use an opaque photograph. I'll make a transparency of it, so then the colors underneath on the ground will come through the transparency. So the colors on the ground and the transparency become one, and makes it more magical for me.
Thank you, Floyd. Those are beautiful pieces. Thanks for sharing them. Um, you've talked about working on some public arts projects and being in service. Can you talk a little bit about your row house project?
Yeah, well, row house, the face of row house is Rick Lowe. But with Rick Lowe, and that's Rick standing on the left, he, along with 6 other artists, I included, would meet and have dinner and lunch and talk about what could we do in a neighborhood in Houston, in a neighborhood that was deprived, a neighborhood that may have been drug infested. And we met for maybe a year trying to figure out what we wanted to do in the community, how art could uplift a community. And Rick saw these houses on Holman Street near Live Oak in Houston in 3rd Ward. And Rick shared that with us. We all agreed that we should deal with those houses as part of the project. And what Rick was saying was that it was sort of symbolic, because John Biggers, the late John Biggers, would use row houses as a part of his imagery, and how befitting if we could use these row houses to uplift the neighborhood. And that's what John would do with his imagery and his paintings. And so Rick Lowe, Jesse Live, Bert Samples, the late Bert Long, the late James Betterson, George Smith, and I we got together and with the whole community, not just African Americans, but rich and poor, Black, white, Asian, Hispanic. Because we were artists, we could get that kind of participation. And I remember we had at least three houses or four that were there for single women with children. And they would stay for a year or two, and they would get trained. They would have to be under contract, so they get trained, so they would get off welfare, and they would have a job. And one of the women has a PhD, and so that's what artists can do in a community. Just as Brandywine has transformed that area on Broad Street. You know, it was a blighted area too, I believe. And I think there was drug activity. But when an artist moves into a community and they set their mind on changing attitudes, changing conditions, it happens. It happens. And so Project Row House are two classic examples of what art institutions can do to a community.
Has the pandemic affected you at all?
No, other than make me or give me opportunity to make more work. I mean, I've been more prolific in this pandemic than I've ever been. This piece behind me right there was one of the works I've done. I've done many works, and it's because I'm a professor at U of H downtown. I would work at home, and I could work all day or all night. There wasn't a curfew as far as me going to this studio and then having to travel home. So I had me a studio at home too, and so it did not influence the imagery. It was an opportunity to be really engaged in productivity, and so I was able to produce a lot more work than I normally do because I focused more, and it's a sad situation. Of course, so many people have passed away, and some still are suffering, especially over in India. But it gave me an opportunity to really focus in my work.
Well, good for you, because I know a lot of people had a really hard time being motivated at all. So it's good to hear that you were inspired to work even more.
You know, I don't allow bad times or bad things to change how I think. My son would say, I'm always an eternal optimist. It's so we had a conversation a couple of nights ago about that, and so I've always been able to work through bad times, and so this pandemic didn't do anything but make me stubborn and make me more firm on producing work, but also at the same time doing things to help people. And that's one of the things that I do with Manor House, which is a place where we give food to the poor. And we had to figure out a way of doing that in a pandemic. And so that's why I'm an artist, social servant.
And what do you have coming up in the future, Floyd?
Well, I have a show, a group show in Dallas. I have a one-man show here at Nicole Longnecker Gallery. And there's a book that's coming out on me. It's going to be sort of my life story in art, and it's going to be produced by Texas A&M, and that should come out in a year and a half to 2 years. It's going to be a hard copy. It's going to have at least 80 full color pages of images, and Professor Mark Sabanko, a good friend of mine, a great painter. He brought the idea to me maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and with Dr. Susan Baker, we worked together in trying to create this book, and it's going to happen. So those are some of the things that I'm working on, and some other things in development, but I don't want to talk about them right now.
Okay. Um, so you talked about briefly with me moving from Memphis, where you went to undergraduate school, to Philadelphia, where you went to graduate school. Can you talk about what it was like to move from south to north in the 70s?
Yeah, that was an experience. Now I've been, my aunt had been living in Brooklyn since the 50s, my dad's older sister. So I would visit New York in 64. Wells Fair was there, I think, at that time. But I would go to New York several times. As I had an uncle that lived in Montclair, New Jersey. So every summer while in undergraduate school, I would go up there and work at Brookdale Soda Company in the town, name of the town, Clifton, New Jersey. Brookdale doesn't exist anymore. So I've had an experience of going to the north, but moving from Memphis to Philadelphia was quite an experience because it was going to be a permanent thing, and so my wife and I packed up our little yellow Volkswagen with a U-Haul trailer behind that was larger than the Volkswagen. Entering into Philadelphia, and I was going down Broad Street driving, and I said to my wife, I said, "Honey, it looks like there's a building in the middle of the street." And the closer I got, I said, "Yes, there is a building in the middle of the street." And I'm trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do? And I saw people coming out of the building. And then it pushed me to the right, and I went around that building. That was City Hall. So that was my first introduction to Southern boy, small town of Memphis, going to the big town of Philadelphia, and having a great experience for 3 years, living there and working there and befriending Alan and so many Mo Brooker and so many John Dowell and so many other artists, late Paul King. Met Charles White when he taught, not he did a lecture at Columbia, and so that was Philadelphia was my awakening. I became an apprentice under 2 professors, and I teased because they said, "Well, you're in graduate school. What are you doing working under under one of the professors?" I said, "Well, operative word is school. I'm still in school, and I still could learn something." And and and, and Roger Anlacher taught me a lot. Funny part was I could paint on Roger Anlacher, on Dick Calder's paintings, but Roger Anlacher would only allow me to observe. They were 2 great painters, and an influence on me learning more about the technical aspect of producing a painting, making sure that it has longevity, and that I know the science of the work, and that I had the ability to draw well. That's, I'm an abstract artist now, but artists should know how to draw well before they become so free with their work. So Philadelphia was a great experience. First time eating pizza. They had it in Memphis, but I didn't. I wouldn't taste it. But when I got to Pagano's, and I think it's oh wow, I can't think of this place. Memos or Memo. Alan didn't know the name of that chain, I think. But yeah, my experience was getting an opportunity to try a variety of foods from a variety of cultures. That was an awakening for me.
And you have a website, Floyd.
Yes, I do.
Want to talk a little bit about your website?
I developed that website several years ago. I was looking at William T. Williams' website and kind of modeled mine after his. But on that website, Floyd Newsum, Newsum, spell the last name right, .com. There are several videos on there, and there's a video that deals with my public art, one of my sculptures downtown here in Houston. Uh, 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 there are those images, and in fact, just stay right there. The piece on the left with the sort of blue square, that's owned by Alice Walton, who is the founder of Crystal Bridges. Or at least her representatives purchased that work back in 2008 at a Miami Basel. Then the piece on the far right in that same row was in a show that the great Valerie Cassell Oliver, who's chief curator in Virginia. Wow, what's the city? Having that moment. But anyway, she was here for many years at the Contemporary Arts Museum, but that was in a show called Black Abstraction.
Was it Suzanne Delahanty?
Pardon?
Was it Suzanne Delahanty?
No.
At the Institute of Contemporary Art?
No, she's at a museum, the Museum of Fine Arts in Virginia, and Richmond, Virginia. That's Richmond, Virginia. And so, actually, these works you're only seeing part of them. Piece on the far right, that's a piece that Alan Van Fleet donated to the museum, Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture. So when you go there, you're going to see that piece, but that's only a part of it. Now you can see the whole piece.
Ah.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's through the grace of from the Van Fleet family. Mm-hmm.
If anybody has questions, you can put them in the chat. But I'd like to thank Floyd for graciously coming on today from his studio in Houston. And we look forward to your book in a year and a half or so. Don't forget to check our website, Brandywine Workshop and Archives. So I appreciate everyone turning up, and we're going to be doing this again in another month. So keep looking out in your emails for the links, and be sure to contact us, and absolutely look at our shop, because we have a lot of great works for sale, including Floyd's work. So keep a lookout for what we're up to in the next few months or so. And thank you.
Again, it was a great pleasure for you guys inviting me, and people shouldn't go to Brandywine Print Workshop site. The greatest artists, not only in the African American diaspora here, but there are other artists, very noted artists, that have produced works at Brandywine. And Alan is truly a legend. If anyone know of the late Bob Blackburn in New York, Alan is the equivalent. He is the contemporary legend of printmaking. And thank you, Alan, for all those opportunities you allowed me to make at least 3 prints there. Hope to be back again sometime, and much success.
Thank you, Floyd. And I want to remind our viewers that artura.com or .org is on the our Brandywine website, and you educators who are planning your next year's curriculum, be sure to take a look at Artura and see if it's something that you'd be interested in. It's a really wonderful resource. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and see you soon.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.